What do you do when the person sitting behind you isn't a normal passenger? This elderly taxi driver experienced exactly that. When the woman in the back seat with bloodshot eyes and hands tied behind her back whispered, "Please save me," the driver looked in the rearview mirror and everything changed. Welcome. Before we continue this powerful story of hidden courage and unexpected heroism, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These moments matter. The clock on Harold's dashboard read 11:47 p.m. when he pulled into the taxi stand outside Union Station. At 73, most men his age were home in bed, maybe watching late-night television or reading a book by lamplight. But Harold preferred the night shift. It was quieter, less traffic, fewer questions about why a man his age was still working. He'd been driving taxi for 12 years now, ever since Martha passed. The house had become too quiet, too full of memories, and the pension wasn't enough to fill the hours between sunrise and sunset. So he'd bought the old Crown Victoria, painted it yellow, and started picking up strangers in the dark. Harold wasn't much for conversation. He'd nod when passengers got in, ask where to, and drive in comfortable silence. Most people appreciated that about him. In a world full of chatty Uber drivers and oversharing cab operators, Harold offered something rare: peace. Tonight felt different, though. There was tension in the air, the kind he used to recognize when he was younger, when recognition meant the difference between going home and not going home at all. But that was 40 years ago, in a different life, wearing a different uniform. The radio crackled. Unit 47, pick up at Mercy General Hospital. Emergency entrance. Harold keyed the mic. Unit 47, copy, en route. He pulled away from the station, driving through empty streets toward the hospital. The city looked different at night, more honest somehow. The polish wore off, and you could see what things really were underneath. Mercy General's emergency entrance was lit up like a stadium, ambulances parked at odd angles, paramedics moving with purpose. Harold pulled into the pickup zone and waited, engine running, watching the automatic doors slide open and closed. At 12:23 a.m., 3 people emerged from the hospital. 2 men in dark jackets flanked a woman in a hospital gown. Something about their formation made Harold's old instincts twitch. The men weren't supporting her. They were controlling her. The taller man opened the front passenger door and slid in beside Harold. "Airport," he said curtly. "Terminal 2. The second man guided the woman into the back seat, then got in beside her. Harold glanced in the rearview mirror and felt his chest tighten. The woman's eyes were wide, darting, filled with a fear that had nothing to do with illness. Her hospital gown was torn at the shoulder, and there were fresh bruises on her wrists. "Is everything all right back there?" Harold asked quietly. The man in front turned to look at him. "She's fine. Just had surgery. Medication makes her confused." But Harold had seen confused, and this wasn't it. This was terror. As he pulled away from the hospital, Harold caught the woman's eyes in the mirror. She was trying to tell him something without speaking, her lips moving silently. Then, when the men weren't looking, she mouthed 2 words that made Harold's blood run cold. "Help me." Harold had been a lot of things in his 73 years. Husband, father, friend. But before all that, for 25 years, he'd been something else entirely. SWAT team leader Harold "Ghost" Martinez, Los Angeles Police Department, specialized in hostage rescue, high-risk warrant service, and situations that couldn't be solved with words. He'd retired at 50, thinking he'd never need those skills again. But skills like his don't fade. They just wait. The man in front was checking his phone, confident that he was dealing with just another cab driver. The man in back was holding the woman's arm, not gently. And the woman, Harold could see she was fighting to stay conscious, fighting against whatever they'd given her. "Ma'am," Harold said quietly, meeting her eyes in the mirror, "are you feeling sick? Should we stop somewhere?" The man in back spoke up sharply. "She's fine, just drive." But Harold saw the woman nod almost imperceptibly. She was trying to tell him yes, she needed help, without alerting her captors. Harold had been in this situation before, decades ago. Different setting, same dynamics. Predators, prey, and someone in between who had to choose a side. He made his choice. Harold's mind shifted into a mode he hadn't accessed in years. Threat assessment. The man in front, mid-30s, athletic build, bulge under his left armpit indicating a shoulder holster. Right-handed based on how he held his phone. Probably armed, definitely dangerous. The man in back, larger, early 40s, wearing a heavy coat despite the warm night, could be concealing multiple weapons, positioned to control the woman but also to watch Harold. The woman, late 20s, approximately 130 pounds, clearly drugged but fighting it. Victim, not accomplice. Priority 1, keep her safe. Environment, traveling north on Highway 101, light traffic, approximately 20 minutes to LAX. Multiple off-ramps available. Radio in the car could reach dispatch, but these men would hear any call. Harold adjusted his rearview mirror not to see the road, but to maintain visual contact with the back seat. The woman was looking at him again, and this time she managed to whisper something. Not. Hospital. Patient. The man beside her tightened his grip on her arm. Shut up. Harold had learned long ago that successful operations required patience, preparation, and precise timing. You don't rush into a hostage situation. You create the right conditions for success. He began driving slower, taking the scenic route. When the man in front noticed, Harold said, "Sorry, construction up ahead, taking side streets." It wasn't true, but it bought him time to think. Harold needed to separate the threats from the victim, neutralize the weapons, and do it all without getting anyone killed. In his SWAT days, he'd have had a team, tactical gear, backup. Tonight, he had a 1998 Crown Victoria and 40 years of experience. But experience, it turned out, was enough. "You know," Harold said conversationally, "I've been driving cab for 12 years, picked up all kinds of people, businessmen, tourists, families." He paused, meeting the woman's eyes in the mirror. "And sometimes, people who aren't where they want to be." The man in front turned to look at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Harold said, "just making conversation." But his hands were positioning themselves on the steering wheel in a way he hadn't used since his tactical days, and his right foot was calculating the distance to the brake pedal. Harold saw his opportunity when they approached the intersection of Wilshire and Veteran. The irony of the street name wasn't lost on him. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "when I stop this car, you're going to want to duck down and cover your head. Can you do that?" The woman's eyes widened, but she nodded slightly. The man in front was getting suspicious. "What did you just say to her?" "I asked if she needed a tissue," Harold replied calmly, but his body was already moving. 40 years fell away like old clothes, and Harold Martinez, SWAT commander, took control of the vehicle. He yanked the steering wheel hard right while simultaneously slamming the brakes. The Crown Vic lurched into the curb with a tremendous crash, throwing both men forward. Harold had braced for impact. They hadn't. Before the car stopped moving, Harold was in motion. He grabbed the man in front by the throat with his left hand, while his right hand found the gun under the man's jacket. A quick pressure point squeeze, and the weapon was his. The man in back was reaching for his own gun when Harold spun around and showed him the muzzle of his partner's pistol. "Hands where I can see them," Harold said, and his voice carried 40 years of authority. "Now." The woman was conscious now, the adrenaline burning through whatever they'd given her. Harold kept the gun trained on both men while he spoke to her. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" She was crying, but nodding. They took me from my apartment, said they were police, but," she looked at the men with hatred, "they're not police." The man in front was holding his throat, glaring at Harold. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Actually," Harold said quietly, "I know exactly what I'm doing. I spent 25 years doing it." He pulled out his cell phone with one hand, never taking his eyes off the threats. 911, this is Harold Martinez, retired LAPD. I need units at Wilshire and Veteran. I have 2 suspects in custody for kidnapping and 1 victim who needs medical attention. The dispatcher recognized the calm authority in his voice. Units are en route. Are you secure? Affirmative. Suspects are disarmed and contained. The man in back was staring at Harold with new understanding. You're a cop. Was. Harold corrected. SWAT. 25 years. You picked the wrong cab. The police arrived within 4 minutes. Good response time for a Tuesday night. Harold handed over the suspect's weapons and gave his statement to Detective Sarah Chen, a young officer who reminded him of his daughter. Mr. Martinez, she said, reviewing her notes, according to our records, you retired as a SWAT commander in 2001. Commendations for hostage rescue, including the Jefferson Elementary incident. Harold nodded. He remembered Jefferson Elementary. 23 children held by an armed gunman. No shots fired, no casualties, just patience, planning, and precision. Sir, Detective Chen continued, what you did tonight, that was textbook tactical intervention. You saved that woman's life. Harold looked over at the ambulance where paramedics were checking the victim. She was talking now, alert, alive, safe. I just drove taxi, he said quietly. But they both knew it was more than that. The woman, her name was Lisa Connor, and she was a nurse at Mercy General, insisted on talking to Harold before the ambulance took her away. Sir, she said, taking his weathered hand in both of hers, I don't know who you were before tonight, but I know who you are now. You're my hero. Harold felt his throat tighten. I'm just a cab driver, miss. No, she said firmly. You're something much more important. You're someone who still cares enough to act. As the ambulance pulled away, Detective Chen approached Harold one more time. Mr. Martinez, we're going to need you to come in tomorrow for a more detailed statement. These guys are part of a human trafficking ring we've been tracking for months. Harold nodded. I'll be there. Sir, Detective Chen hesitated. We could use someone with your experience, consulting work, maybe training, if you're interested. Harold looked at his damaged taxi, then at the spot where the ambulance had been. At 73, he thought his fighting days were over. But maybe there were different kinds of fights, different ways to serve. Let me think about it, he said. Harold was drinking coffee in his kitchen when the local news came on. The anchor was a young woman with perfect hair and a practiced smile. Last night, a routine taxi ride became a dramatic rescue when an elderly cab driver helped police capture 2 suspected human traffickers. The driver, 73-year-old Harold Martinez, is a retired SWAT commander who used his training to save a kidnapping victim. Harold turned off the television. He didn't need to hear the rest. His phone had been ringing all morning, reporters mostly, but also his daughter calling from Denver, his son from Seattle, neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years. Word was spreading. But the call that mattered came at 9:15 a.m. It was Lisa Connor. Mr. Martinez, this is Lisa from last night. I wanted to thank you again and to tell you something. I have a 6-year-old daughter. Because of what you did, I'm going to see her grow up. I'm going to see her graduate, get married, have children of her own. You didn't just save my life. You saved my whole future. Harold felt tears he hadn't shed in years. You don't need to thank me, miss. Yes, I do. And I'm going to keep thanking you. Every birthday, every Christmas, every moment I get to spend with my daughter, I'm going to remember that I have it because of you. Harold went back to driving taxi the next week. Same car, repaired now, same routes, same quiet service. But something had changed. Word had gotten around about what happened that night, and passengers treated him differently now. With respect, with curiosity, with gratitude they couldn't quite explain. A month later, Harold got a package in the mail. No return address, just his name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a photo, Lisa Connor and her daughter at a playground, both smiling. On the back, someone had written, "Because of you, we get to make new memories every day. Thank you, LC." Harold put the photo on his refrigerator, next to one of Martha from their wedding day. Detective Chen called that same week. "Mr. Martinez, we've been talking to other departments about your case. There are a lot of people who could use someone with your skills. Part-time consulting, training new officers in crisis intervention. Interested?" Harold looked out his window at the taxi in his driveway. He thought about Lisa Connor and her daughter, about all the other Lisa Connors who might need someone to care enough to act. "Yes," he said, "I'm interested." Because sometimes, Harold realized, retirement doesn't mean you stop serving. Sometimes it just means you find new ways to make a difference. And sometimes the most important battles are fought by people nobody expects to be warriors. Harold Martinez had been many things in his 73 years, but that night, driving through the dark streets of Los Angeles, he discovered he was something he'd never expected to be again. He was exactly where he needed to be.